Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Fantasy Fiends podcast. I'm Stevie Collier, your Collier, your host, and I'm here with my co-host Andy Palaquin. And today we are honored to have CT Phipps. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, CT Phipps.
CT Phipps. Where's Phipps from? I've never heard the last name Phipps.
Well, it's one of those things like if you go, we went down to Disneyland to find out the origin of our name, and it turns out it's just the Scottish firm of Philip. So not quite a story there.
Yeah, come on, you should have made something up there.
Oh yes, it's a secret cult of worship of Cthulhu.
You know, I really want to use the name Phippsy. Like, just that name is just such a funny name, sort of like a sidekick, Phippsy.
Please don't. Yeah, there used to be a pretzel chip or something thing that I could point out to say, oh, that's how you pronounce my name, but that's been out of production for like 10 years. So,
yeah. Stevie, I was going to say what Rebecca echoed. You had the intro so perfect. There was no, other languages. There was nothing weird. No. And then you bungled it.
I've been studying French a little bit more. When I'm not at my girlfriend's house, I usually do it at the house here. Yeah, I know that's confusing. I live in two places. It's weird to me too. And I study Japanese usually at her place, and my English is just wrecked. I mean, I think the other day I forgot the word contraband, and it turned into condom. And it's just like it doesn't fit, literally. Anyway, so are we calling you CT?
That's fine. Go right ahead.
Okay.
Also, Charles, Chuck, whatever.
Can you, like, if we Google Charles Phipps, will it come up the CT Phipps author page, or will it come up with something else?
It's interesting enough because I was originally going to go under Charles Phipps for my author name, but when I decided to do my first book, which was Esoterrorism and followed by the Rules of Supervillainy, I found out that there were like 5 or 6 Charles Phippses, and most of them were podiatrists.
Yeah, I just googled you, and the top result is like a comic, like an anime.
Yeah, it's best to just go see Phipps if you want to look up my work for whatever reason.
Very cool. All right, so Charles/CT. We're gonna do that all night long. Call you Charles/CT just for the heck of it. Stevie likes to dump our guests into the deep end right off the bat and say, "Tell us about something cool that happened to you this week."
Well, then you are in poor luck because I'm not at all a cool person for things to happen to. Yeah, mostly I'm going to just share the wonderful stories of me connecting with my fans, writing, and just trying to find inspiration where I can for my next work. I'm working on 2 books right now. The 3rd volume of the Cthulhu Armageddon series, which is my post-apocalypse series, and the 6th book in my supervillainy saga book, which is called The Kingdom of Supervillainy, where they have an Indiana Jones-esque adventure to the Hollow Earth.
Very cool. That is cool.
Now, let me ask you this. How do you work on 2 books at the same time?
Oh, that would kill me.
Oh, well, it's a terrible idea, and you really should focus on one at a time. But sometimes you get 2 ideas stuck in your head, and you just have to alternate chapters until the inspiration for one disappears. Wow. I mean, I've very rarely successfully completed 2 at the same time, but you can get maybe half of one done before you focused on the other one completely.
I did that one time with the first of my Queen of Thieves series while I was writing the 3rd of the Darkblade series. And I was like, nope, never again. I will not touch another book until the one that I'm writing now is done. Even if it's like 3 or 4 weeks or something, unless it's like some crazy deadline that I've got to do some editing or something. But otherwise, it's just one trick pony here.
I don't recommend it there. But the thing about inspiration is it doesn't care what you think. In fact, actually, that's how the Supervillainy Saga, which is my best-selling work, came. Because I was originally planning to do the what I call the Jim Butcher thing, was where I was going to write my magnum opus, the one series I would just write one volume after another, and it would be hugely successful because I didn't know anything about writing. And that was originally my Esoterrorism series, which has 2 books out. And I just had this idea for a comic brain candy sort of silly book about a guy who finds a magic cloak and decides to become a supervillain rather than a superhero. And I couldn't get all the snarky jokes out of my head, so I decided I'm just going to write this and get it out of my brain so I can work on my real series. And of course, that proved to be my most successful series by far, because there are plenty of urban fantasy and fantasy novels, and but there was less so superhero novels at that time. It was at the height of superhero craze, and it just sold like gangbusters. And I was like, well, I guess I made a good decision there.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, Stevie, why don't you tell us about something cool that happened to you this week?
Well, I have good news and bad news, and Andy knows, and I wasn't going to say anything on the podcast. I've been thinking about it all day long, whether or not, but I think people are going to sense that my energy is a little bit low today, but not too low, so it's still going to be a very entertaining podcast. But I've been struggling with a cat at home. His name was Willie, Prince Williams, Willoughby, Caweels, Willoughby the Third, lots of names. Great cat. I've had him since I was 13 years old, and we found out after about $1,500 worth of vet bill stuff, we found out that he had cancer, lymphoma. Yes, it was horrible. It was just horrible news. Lymphoma, liver failure, and kidney failure. We knew about the liver failure and kidney failure, but we were going to continue feeding him and try and get him better because there was a chance to get his, I guess you call them vitals. I don't know. The numbers for the liver and kidney, which they did. They did get better. And then we found out he had cancer. And not to make thank you, but it was weird. It's like as soon as we got the news, the cat took a nosedive. And so today I held him. I think all cats are girls. I held him while they put him to sleep, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I've done speeches in front of 100 people. I've ridden roller coasters. I've done all sorts of scary stuff, stuff that I thought at that time was the worst thing ever, and this was the absolute worst thing. I mean, I broke down in that vet office. It was rough, but the good news about that was the cat was suffering, and now he is playing with a red laser dot in heaven, and that makes me feel good.
The great red laser dot in the sky.
Yes. It's kind of ironic now that we've had the red wolf moon. Yeah, Willie's up there playing with it, but yeah, great cat. Just send your prayers to Willoughby. But another good news is I set a record yesterday for writing. I wrote 5,000 words. It's my new personal record. And the thing is, it came super easily. I just wrote some really good words, and I thought about Andy the whole time. I was like, oh, Andy'd be so proud.
So it was a romance scene then?
It was. Lots of butt stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Stevie Collier taking the podcast to weird places since 2017.
I got to bring it back from that depressing stuff, but all that's so it's gonna be tomorrow. I'm back to work and I hit another 5,000 words. Also, real quick, more good news. Tomorrow I go see a hockey game, the Stars in Austin, with the girlfriend, and then she's watching this podcast. I almost gave away what we're doing Saturday. It's part of our Valentine's Day gift, but we're doing something. I almost said it.
Now next episode you have to tell us what it is that you will do.
I will. It's something I'm very passionate about, and I think she's going to really enjoy it. And we're going with my family too, so it's going to be awesome. So yeah,
that's
lots of news from Stevie. So Andy, what's something cool that happened to you this week?
Oh man, there's so much. I mean, for those of you who are watching, you can see the beard after 1 week is growing back in nicely. By this time next week, I'll be back to full face. That's nice. My girlfriend today, my wife, she looked at me and she's like, yeah, you shouldn't do that ever again. Find something else to do next time.
Are we saying blue hair for me for 400 subscribers?
Yeah, totally.
I'm not sure that blue beards are really reassuring for girlfriends.
No, they're probably not.
Joke there.
Yeah. Yeah, no. So there's that. The beard's coming back in after last week's shaving. Also super cool. The first book of the Heirs of Destiny series released on Tuesday. official launch day, Tuesday, January 22nd. And awesomely enough, it's already the #1 in one of its categories and rising to hopefully dominate. We'll see.
Awesome. I'm going to go give a plug to you, Andy, there that I've only read a couple of your books there, but I enjoyed them both, and I'm really hoping to finish up the Night Guild series at some point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you the characters from this new series are actually it's a spin-off of the Night Guild series and then the Hunters series. So it's actually cool because you can read, like, a few people have asked me for the suggested reading order, and there's 2 ways to read it. Sort of like 2 ways to watch Star Wars. You watch it chronologically / read it chronologically. You go Queen of Thieves, Traitor's Fate, Hero of Darkness, and then Heirs of Destiny, or you do it in order that I wrote it, which is the Hero of Darkness series first, Queen of Thieves, Traitor's Fate, and then Heirs of Destiny. There's 2 ways to read it. Both, they're all connected.
I love it when authors make their own little mini universes and cross over their works there. That actually happened with me with my latest book, The Tournament of Supervillainy, which is the 5th book in the Supervillainy saga. I have a crossover tournament, Mortal Kombat style, where I brought my characters from various worlds into the world because if I needed to write a big old crossover parody, I might as well cross over my own work.
You brought in Jane Doe and the guy from Lucifer's Nebula, or was that a mistake? The Lucifer's Nebula one.
It's Lucifer's Star, Lucifer's Nebula sequel. But yeah, I brought in 3 characters actually. I brought in Jane Doe from the United States of Monsters and Bright Falls Mystery series. That's my supernatural. I'm totally ripping off the World of Darkness of RPG series. Lucifer's Star, which is my dark space opera, or as I call it, Star Wars rated R, and front Agent G series, which is a kind of spy Born Identity cyberpunk series where it's set in the present world, but the government and corporations have covered up the fact they have superpowered agents.
Very cool. Very cool. And I guess my last bit of awesome news is that I started work on the 2nd book in the Silent Champion series today, and I got 10,000 words done.
Oh, nice. I envy you that there. I've only written 10,000 words in one day once while my wife was visiting her family, and I was completely brain fried by the end of it, starting to see vampires in the walls.
Yeah.
I took a lot of Mountain Dew, too, so that might have helped.
Yeah, definitely. Those days, Thursdays and Fridays, I usually put in about 6 to 7 hours, and I'll do 12 to 14,000 words. This new book, I'm taking a bit more time on each chapter because it's military, so you've got to be a lot more precise. So 10,000 words is kind of a slower day, but the words, I'm really happy with them because I got some really interesting stuff for the character. And I like research on military stuff, not only like military action, but also the kind of personalities in the military, the people, the way they relate to each other that I had no idea. So it's a really interesting learning experience for me.
Oh, yes. One of my early writings, I thankfully had someone in the military point out they were going to really get me on the terminology where I got a couple of things wrong. It's like, it's magazines, not
clips, cartridges.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. They were like, you would get a 0 star from any military man from that point on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I'm worried about that. The military readers.
Oh, yes.
I took a class. I've taken 2 gun classes, concealed carry and gun defense or something. And both classes always started out with like, is it magazine or clips? And whoever said magazines, they were like pretending like asking them to leave, you know. Wait, which one's right? It's clips, right? Clips is the right one.
I think it depends on which kind of gun you've got. But I don't know. I think we're making a point that we don't care, but they do.
That's true. That's true. I've heard a lot of sci-fi people get in trouble for making these fake worlds in sci-fi worlds, and then like people are like, no, that would never work. Like, yeah,
that's the point.
Wouldn't. Yeah, it's got fiction in there for a reason, guys.
There's a reason that a lot of places just completely make up fake guns so you can't get any details wrong.
Someone, I think y'all find this funny.
The AC-7 Peacemaker.
One of my Peacemaker, yeah. I had this, somebody copied one of my audiobooks from Audible and posted it on YouTube, thinking I wouldn't find it. And it's got like,
that happened to me a lot too. I
know. Yeah, you gotta, I personally take them down just because it's 2,100 views. And I was like, come on, you got to support me a little bit. It took forever to write that. Yeah. And one of the comments was, instantly stopped listening when I heard the word badass. Badass is such a bad word.
I'm like,
I bet there's such a stick in the mud.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, it's hilarious when you do make it to an extent that you get 100 or so reviews, because when you do that, you're inevitably going to get some really weird ones. It's like, I gave this 1 star because it has harsh language.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, and this another, and other ones will have complaints that have nothing to do with the book itself, and you're wondering what they're reviewing instead. And a few are going to be political, even if your book is like, "Oh, I overthrew the empire."
Mm-hmm.
But that's part of the fun there being an author. And if you think we don't read your reviews, well, you're wrong.
Yeah, I read them all.
Re-upload. Yeah. Check every day.
I feel like if they're writing a negative review, it's like soul crushing. They like go out of their way to make sure the author feels bad. It's never just like sometimes, but usually it's not even not constructive criticism. It's just bashing the book.
Oh yeah,
and I can't do that. I can't do that to someone's book.
I do admit I did one of my favorite all-time reviews was a 2-star review though, because of like the guy hated the book, but he explained in detail what ticked him off about it. And I'm like, I can respect that, but that's almost never what you get with negative reviews. There, it's like. Just yesterday, it's like, this series is running out of steam. I don't find it as funny as I did the previous one, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah. And what star did they leave you for that?
This one was just another 1-star review there, and I'm like, did it go down that dramatical quality there, or are you just being extremist in your reviews? Because I've also met plenty of people who like list a bunch of complaints. It's like, it was an okay average read, 5 stars. And I'm like, there's a definite tendency toward one end of the spectrum or the other with online reviews, and that's just how the game plays. I prefer the 5-star though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true that. So a little bit about CT. Did we already talk about your superhero books? Yeah, we did. Because you talked about getting. Guys, I have a headache from crying, so I'm a little out of it.
But we'll go right into the discussion topic. How's that, Stevie?
Great idea.
Oh,
great idea.
Yeah, I appreciate you talking about the superhero books, but we were actually here about the fantasy books.
Definitely.
No, we're not. I feel like Andy's holding my hand, and we're just like getting through the podcast together.
Like,
that's how it is every week, Stevie.
What? That is some BS. I hold your hand.
You do all the dramatic flair stuff. You're all the razzle dazzle, and then I'm like, all right, Stevie, back on track.
We can go on a topic that if you can't do it, that's easier. Like talking about how much we hate The Last Jedi.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So real quick, back to Andy real quick. So I'm basically the cheerleader. And also,
we all know Andy's holding your hand, man.
Yeah. Fun fact: I always, instead of saying pom pom, I always say tampon. So it's like the cheerleaders holding their tampons. That'd be some football game.
Yeah,
yes. Andy is Beyonce, your Destiny's Child. Let's just be honest here.
Dad.
All right, so the discussion topic of the week, back on track from tampon discussion. So what I found really cool, Charles was telling me about his book, the Wraith Lord / Wraith Knight series, and he was saying, so it's set after the Dark Lord's defeat, right, Charles?
Yeah, the idea with Wraith Knight was I definitely had an idea to do a dark fantasy series, and well, I'm obviously not the kind of blood and guts George R. R. Martin type there, because the fantasy I grew up in were magic heavy Dungeons and Dragons sort of things there, but that didn't mean they couldn't touch on interesting and deep topics. And this one was, it always strikes me that everyone tries to redo the Lord of the Rings and the War in the Rings and orcs versus humans, the Dark Lords, and so on. There, what would be an interesting story if we followed up maybe 5 or 6 years later and saw how things were once the war was won? Would things go to be the happily ever we thought it would be, or would it be more like virtually the aftermath of every single war I've experienced in my life, where things go to shit?
Yeah, so you playing off your Lord of the Rings analogy. There's that epic scene in Lord of the Rings where the people are all bowing to Aragorn and I'm gonna get so killed. Arwen, there we go. I remembered her name. and then the hobbits bow and they say, "You bow to no one." That's just like chills all the time. And the movie kind of ends there. They do go back to the Shire and stuff, but in the book, after there's this whole heroic epic climax, they go back to the Shire, and it turns out the Shire's gone to shit.
What?
And yeah,
Are the movies any good?
You haven't seen the Lord of the Rings movies, Stevie?
No, I've read them. I didn't know the movies were good.
What? Stevie,
well, I feel like interrupting this just right now to give.
I'm just messing with y'all. I'm just messing with y'all.
I was about to say this is the last podcast ever.
Oh, of course I've seen it. Of course.
You'd be surprised at how many of my friends genuinely just didn't bother to see it there because they were either snooty fantasy fans or just like, oh, I just never found the time for it. And I'm like, you've seen Star Wars 87 times. I don't know why you wouldn't try something else.
Yeah. Anyway,
but I wish you had held off for like one more minute for pretending to have not seen it, because I love explaining the Lord of the Rings movies to fans of the books. It's like, just imagine that the hobbits weren't the stars, and you had and Aragorn was, and you had the entire idea. You could just delete the hobbits completely from the movies, and it would be a fairly stereotypical fantasy film, but really good, pretty.
Yeah.
And
back on topic.
Yeah.
So
we're not going to be talking about Peter Jackson now.
No,
he's so much better than I am.
Come on.
Anyways, in Lord of the Rings, after that battle, there's that big epic scene, and then they go home and they find out that their home's gone to shit. And so it kind of got me thinking when Charles suggested this, is like, that's really interesting to think about what happens afterward. Let's take, for example, your classic final military battle between the good and the bad guys, right? Who are all those soldiers that are fighting? Their fathers, sons, brothers, loved ones. Yeah. So now the battle between all the orcs and the humans, the casualties had to be crazy high, in the thousands easily. So then how many thousands of families have to find out that their son's never coming home? A lot of times the warriors back in medieval times were also the farmers. They were the ones who worked, because a government controlled military wasn't as common. So the farmers would be, gathered for the battle. They'd go to war, or they'd fight the battle for their lord or their king or whatever, and then they'd go home and they'd have to take in the harvest. Or the harvest would have gone, I don't know, I think the word's fallowed, like the harvest would have been destroyed because there was no one to bring in the crops. And so then people would be starving. And it's sort of this thing that you don't ever think about when you're reading an epic story. It's like, yes, the good guys won. The story's over. The bad guys got what was coming to them. But it's kind of an interesting thought experiment to sort of follow down that thread and see what would actually happen, how the realm, the kingdom, the castle, the city, whatever, would be affected by the epic climax.
Yeah, that's the thing that comes when you are vilifying one group or another in a war. We have the war between Gondor and Rohan and the Mordorians. But the thing about the Lord of the Rings is, after Sauron is defeated, well, Mordor, at least the part that wasn't destroyed by the volcano, still exists, and so does all the land beyond it. And unless there is a genocide we're not going to be talking about in the appendix, those people are now going to have to learn to live with all these former followers of Sauron, and, well, let's say the orcs. What happens to them? I mean, are they going to be destroyed by the man, which does not pay a very good picture of King Aragorn, or are they going to become just another race of man? And how is that going to play off with those racial supremacist Gondorians who seem to think they're the high human embodiment of everything? And probably the answer will be not very well.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing to think about, sort of the how things play out later on down the line. And that's something that not a lot of authors explore through their work, is the aftermath.
I mean, it's interesting enough because Tolkien himself did plan on following up on this kind of thing, these exact same questions, and he stopped because it was like, man, that story will be depressing.
Yep.
And my idea with Wraith Lord was, I may not be Tolkien, but it was an interesting story to follow up there with the idea that the Dark Lord has been defeated by a group of 9 heroes who have successfully seized control over the kingdoms and made themselves heroes of a generation. And this is about 7 years later, when on a snowy mountaintop somewhere, one of the Wraith Knights, which was the Dark Lord's minions, wakes up from where he's been just gradually getting his free will back after the death and destruction of his master, and is like wakes up and once more he's the one of the 9 heroes of yore. That, oh wow, I have been a monster this entire time. And he looks around and tries to figure out, what do I do with myself being like the orcs, a person with his own free will back, but still viewed as a monster. And the fact that the alliances and the heroics and all the good guys are now making the morally ambiguous choices that they make in a much more complicated political situation. The heroes are now tyrants to some other people who are planning to be their own heroic narratives and overthrowing them. And people are already going, like they did in ancient Greece, to Pericles. Oh well, what have you done for us lately? You may have beat the Persians, but we're throwing you to the wolves.
Yeah, there's that thing, the heroes live long enough and you'll become the villain. That's a meme that's been going around the internet for a few years.
Oh yeah, I mean it's absolutely true there, because the idea is if you're a hero and you do something wonderful and die afterwards, you never have to follow that up with less successful dealings. I mean, no one particularly cares about what happened to the Nazis, but there's these people who have to deal with the de-Germanifying and how so many alliances after World War II broke down. I mean, Soviet Union and became the next enemy.
Yeah. And so how far down that rabbit hole did you go in the Wraith Knight Lord series?
Well, in the Wraith Knight series, the protagonist, Jacob Riversun, was the hero of the previous war who died and got reanimated as a ghost knight.
Okay.
So, yeah. So he effectively wakes up 400 years later. The entire world has changed. His memories of the previous war are kind of completely clouded, and he's had his story rewritten. So he was a very different kind of character. And all the people that were heroes in that time are unrecognizable. And he teams up with a young woman named Regina, who is a former noble of, well, let's just call the Gondor equivalent there. I mean, we're speaking in generalities. And she has decided that the 9 heroes who defeated the Dark Lord have become villains, and it's up to her to overthrow them. And she basically just kind of recruits Jacob for lack of a better, for him to have anything better to do.
So it's like if someone went against the Fellowship of the Ring, essentially.
Oh yes, and of course, he's of the much more darker, less idealistic view that this sort of thing just happens when people are put in power. They have to make decisions to keep that power or distribute it. And in the case of the 9 heroes, they are doing their very best to purify all remnants of the Dark Lord's legacy, and that's become a vicious persecution and empire that is very unrecognizable as the good guys if you're not on their side. And so Jacob ends up trying to rally the former people of Mordor to figure out what kind of society they're making, even though he used to be the one fighting them as well.
Interesting.
And from the 9 heroes' perspective, it's like, oh, another Dark Lord has risen. We got to go stop this guy.
Interesting. That would have been kind of an interesting thing for him to explore in Lord of the Rings, because I know in the movies, I think they kind of fixed it by the ground opening up and swallowing all of the orcs and stuff, and then cutting off access to Mordor, with that big chasm there right in the front of the gate, in front of the Black Gate.
Yeah, very convenient genocide there.
Yeah, exactly.
In this case,
it's not the humans' fault because it was a natural disaster.
Oh, so, yeah, the volcano wiped them all out. Isn't that convenient? No, in this case, now the empire has to decide whether they're going to occupy this territory, colonize it, or just push them to destruction because they are evil, devil-worshipping monsters. And they have their own perspective on this, and they were slaves of the Dark Lord. I mean, I'm not doing a reversal. It's like, oh, Sauron was good all the time along, but in real life, plenty of dictatorships have you do what you got to do to survive.
Stevie, let's talk about the 4 territories at the end of the last book. After the battle is over. Now follow that up a little bit. Follow up what happens after the end of the Dark Assassin
of the full series. Isn't that a spoiler though?
I don't know.
Is it?
Okay, well, yeah, that's fine.
Warning.
I'll talk about it for sure. What's up?
Spoiler warning. You can put that and say skip.
Yeah,
minutes.
It's a spoiler. I think anyone who's read my books knows that I like to end. I've never been a fan of ambiguous endings. I like really strong. Okay, it might be considered ambiguous, and that's ambiguous, and it's subjective. Anyway, oh god. All right.
Tell you what, I'll talk about mine.
No, I know what I want to say.
Okay.
There was something else I want to say before that, real quick though. Endings to me, whenever I'm writing endings, they are like sort of, I want to describe them as the eye of a storm. It's a small grace period where I allow characters to refresh or relax. It's kind of like taking a long rest in D&D. In my opinion, I like to give them rest. I like to give them what they were looking for. They went through the trials of fire. They sacrificed something very large in their life to get what they wanted. And now they've earned rest to enjoy their little reward, whatever they got. And at the very end, I think with every book that I have, within the last 2 paragraphs, something really bad happens or something really badass happens. So I'm very proud of myself for always doing this. I always end each book, even if it was the end of the series, with something that will make you want to read the next book. Not because I want more money. I mean, that's true. I love money. But just because it makes me get chills. I love getting chills at the end of a book. And to me, a strong ending is kind of like, have you ever finished a book and you just close it and it just feels so good?
Yep.
Like, that's how I do. That's what I have, like, yeah. So anyway, that's my idea of writing the end of a story. Just wanted to put my 2 cents in there. Not sure if that was completely relevant.
Totally irrelevant.
It was irrelevant.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about, okay, so like let's say in the Hero of Darkness series, for the world at large, the world goes on, right? The hunter's story is very focused on himself, on his one mission, right? He does affect people around him. And the truth is that those people that he affects in the final book of the series, they're going to become part of the world at large that they haven't been a part of before. They've been sort of living in secret and stuff. So now they're going to sort of become a part of the world. And it's kind of an interesting thought because, okay, they've been living in this lost city for so long. And now the lost city has been found by someone. And those people, they need to, come down to the real world for food or supplies or things like that. Or I think I left it where they can grow all the food they need in the city, but there's going to come a time when they're going to be integrated with the world. So there will come a day, maybe 20, 50, 100, 200 years down the line, when something that was so mythical is all of a sudden just a normal part of life. Like, you travel 5 days to go from one city to another, and then you travel another 5 days to go to this city that's supposed to have been lost for 5,000 years.
It's interesting enough because one of my favorite inspirations and the early father of what we know as space opera now in Frank Herbert Dune, his publishers told him when he finished and turned in the book is, I absolutely love 80% of this book there, but then you keep going on past the ending, which is, of course, was the idea, because the point of Dune, for anyone who hasn't read it, is, okay, we have this big epic heroic story, but this is all a setup, and in real life it doesn't actually end like that when the emperor is overthrown and our hero ascends to everything. No, life goes on and things eventually go to shit. And and he was like, well, that's the story I want to tell because I'm deconstructing this myth. And it's like, but people don't want to end on seeing everything go to shit. So why don't you make that the second book? Which he did, and carried on the story, showing that no matter how epic or impossible the myths are, the world keeps on going, and new threats keep popping up. And
Very
that inspired me, definitely. And I have the second book is currently having its audiobook recorded and is going to be released with the audiobook. It's Wraith Knight, which follows Jacob trying to deal with, I have been a monster for my entire life, and now I need to know what I'm going to do with an immortal one, because I can't bring myself to destroy myself, and there are people suffering all around me. And the war I dedicated my life to is over. Do I start a new one, or do I try and find my way there? And Wraith Lord is about him adjusting to the new cause he's devoted himself to, and figuring out, can I try and make the world a better place, reconcile the factions, and just like, we are not the forces of evil, you're not the forces of good, let's try and build a peace, and how, like a ton of bricks, that goes over with everyone. And the third book will be how all of his attempts to make things better have come crashing down. But that was just inevitable in my work.
Wow. Well, why don't we get a little taste of that work and pop over to the reading section for the day?
Yay!
All right, Charles, you are the director of this movie. Do you want to do the narrator, Jacob's voice, or the woman's voice?
Oh, well, let me go pull that up there so I can make a decision. I will gladly. I can just read the whole thing if you want me to.
Well, we like to act out the voice.
I'll do the narration. How's that?
Okay, perfect. Stevie?
Yes.
Which do you want to do?
Who are the characters?
Clearly he should be the woman's voice.
The woman's voice? I can do the woman's voice.
Usually the woman's voice, so I'm giving you a choice.
I'm going to take that as because I'm just a very talented actor, and not that I have a high-pitched voice. Yes, that's what it is. Exactly.
You're in deep awe of your acting talent and range.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Andy. You should take notes. He's being nice to me.
I'm taking all the notes, Stevie.
Yes,
take all the notes. Actually, real quick about CT's book. Check out the cover. It is freaking awesome. It reminds me of the Lich King from World of Warcraft, kinda.
Oh yeah, snow is underused as a sign of ultimate evil.
Is it really? Are you being that true?
Well, a Sauron is associated with hellfire and brimstone of a volcano.
With
the Lich King is associated with ice and snow and so on there. And
it is.
Of the two, I decided to go with snow. I don't quite know if there's anything else. I don't think you could do beaches and ocean for a Dark Lord.
Well, that was a great idea. I'm just saying. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to change the topic. I'm just saying you have a really cool cover, guys. Go check that book out.
Oh yes,
guys, I'm ready to do the reading. Is it hand drawn?
Visually. Great artist for that. There, I love how he managed to capture such a dark and foreboding presence for Jacob. But also, I loved that Regina's on it as well. She manages to look tough while also being a fantasy heroine.
And also, one more thing before we go on to the reading. Two things. You'll see that the thumbnail is Mordor and the Eye of Sauron. Did that for you, CT.
Thank you.
And another thing, if you're watching and listening to this, please hit that like button, guys. That helps us out so much. This channel is growing rapidly, and it's all thanks to you. So we love you very much. Thank you guys so much. I'm so highly appreciated. So if you hit that like button, I really appreciate it. And with that, I'm good to go.
All right. So Charles, you got this.
Okay, I'll try. I'll definitely try not to fail. Yeah,
what is the female's character's name again?
Regina.
Regina, thank you.
Yes. She's a princess.
Ooh, I'm a pretty princess.
Yes. With a sword. Okay. Rising. Okay. Starting this one. This is from chapter 3, and it's just after an epic dragon fight happened over Jacob and Regina. Jacob's power was enough to slay a couple, because you got to go big or go home. And poor Regina's wounded. Now let us begin. Rising to my feet, I continued to walk to the fallen form of the lesser brown dragon. The female warrior rose to her feet and held a broken sword toward me. Once the weapon might have contained magic, but it was long past. Her helmet was to one side, and her long hair flowed in the snowy winds. The woman was surpassingly lovely with perfect teeth, elfin features, marble-like skin, almost iridescent cat-like green eyes, and silver hair. The only quality that marred her otherwise perfect features was the fact her nose had been broken several times. It was an admirable quality, like the damage her armor possessed, showing she'd put herself to use in the Shadow Guard service. The woman was favoring her right side and could tell she was bleeding badly from a wound there. My natural senses could tell she had cracked ribs as well as a sprained ankle. I admired her scars and practiced fighting stance more than her beauty because it was the attractiveness of the elf-blooded. The she had long lived beside humanity, immortal and perfect, but condescending. Too often, humanity raised these children up as if demigods, treating their unnatural attractiveness and longevity as if it was a blessing from the gods. In short, I've always found them to be too pretty to be attractive.
Begone, Dark Lord, or I will strike you down.
The woman said, waving her broken blade.
The retching stench of your necromancy befouls the air I breathe.
I stared at her, my voice closer to my original, but deeper and throatier. In my day, we spoke with less insolence to our rescuers.
I need no help from a creature of...
The woman collapsed to one knee.
I mean, to say I did not recognize you as a creature of the king below. When I called out to you, I had thought your kind ended with the passing of your master. I cannot defeat you in my present shape, but know I will wound you if I may.
The woman ended her speech in a racking series of coughs. You've been stabbed. You will not survive long. I am sorry.
I will not die. I have a purpose I must fulfill.
The woman said between coughs. The fact she managed to fly a dragon despite this amazed me. Only sheer determination and willpower must have kept her going after the fight she'd been in. A practiced healer might have been able to save her life, but it would be months in recovery, and I was inclined to believe light magic was beyond me now. Searching my fragmented memories, I saw some way to save her life. I already called upon the powers of darkness to defeat the dragon and its riders, so it seemed foolish to hesitate now. Still, I couldn't help but wonder why it was so easy to pursue such an option. Did my current state dull or perhaps ruin my conscience? I couldn't say. Yes, go ahead, blame my influence. Everyone else does. I could hear the trickster laughing in the back of my head, cursing. I found a spell I could heal her, but it was like all the medicinal magic of the king below, painful and bloody. So be it. No, you will not die, I said. Opening my hand, I closed it into a fist and spoke the healing magic's words. The woman screamed. It was terrible to watch her bones knit, her wounds seal, and her body produce new blood as the stolen life essence moved through her body, but it worked. The woman blinked, looking up. Recognition of what I'd done passed across her face.
You healed me?
Yes.
Why?
Why not?
Because you're a Wraith Knight and likely eat infants for supper.
I sincerely hope that is not the case. The woman stood up and said,
I am Regina Whitetrimmer, Knight Captain of the Shadow Guard. I am sworn to destroy your kind, but I will hold off on doing so out of gratitude for the next 30 minutes. Or so if you wish to flee.
How generous of you. Your sword is broken.
It's supposed to be broken.
Regina said, frowning. This must be a new form of combat I'm unfamiliar with. Regina raised an eyebrow.
For a Dark Lord, you're unusually snotty. that was a lot of fun. I love that.
Yeah. I will say that Charles, your humor, well, I've only read the two Lucifer books, Lucifer's Star, Lucifer's Nebula, but it reminds me a lot of the dry humor that David Weber uses in his Safehold series.
I've read David Weber's Honor Harrington series, and I do really appreciate the comparison. He manages to properly capture the kind of deadpan humor that reflects just how screwed every character is.
I like the humor. It actually kind of reminds me of what I like to do in my books. And whenever, I don't know if you noticed, but I kind of answered your question really quickly. Why? That's how I picture some dialogue going on in my books.
Well, I appreciate your reading, and I think you did a great job there. And I do like Regina and Jacob's interactions in the books, and which form the core of the primary relationship, which is that she's very idealistic and believes she's in a typical high fantasy work, while Jacob is definitely coming off a binge of moral ambiguity.
Mm-hmm. Well, the writing was that was a fun read already. It's I don't say this often on podcasts, but this it's like I already felt for the characters, and I love the attitude of Regina.
Oh yeah. It, it's it,
So
it's hard being
go
a
ahead.
half elf with being so perfect and pretty.
I always play half elves when I play D&D. Are you a
I'm a
D&D
half
guy?
giant.
Yeah, Andy's giant for sure.
Oh yeah.
He likes to play
On
himself.
my end, it really depends on what mood there. I definitely try and prefer to play either mages or humans. I really am hard on elves in my in my writing. They're just
I
jerks.
I tend to find a lot of racism in my books. I don't know why that's a common theme that I write about. I think it might be because I grew up in the South, in a rural area for most of my life, and I saw a lot of it. Luckily, I grew up with two open-minded parents who weren't like that at all.
Oh, yeah.
So I was sometimes, not always, not all Texans are like this, especially the closer you get to Austin. But it's always been a theme, and I think it's just because it's always bothered me. But yeah, so are you saying like a lot of people hate the elves throughout the book?
Well, it's more the case is the elves in my series, and generally it's reflected in a lot of works I like. They tend to represent the 1% of the 1%, being that they are the immortal, beautiful, golden, white-skinned people that just happen to be superior to everyone else. It's an easy analog to make that they look down on everyone else, and not always with good reason.
What are we talking about, me?
Either of you two play Skyrim?
I beat Skyrim.
Oh yeah, I love the depiction of the elves in that point, because apparently Elfland has been taken over by the Nazis in that universe. It's like, we're gonna get rid of those impure humans.
I would
mine elf forever.
Are there any fantasy books out there with like a Nazi feel to it? Not because I am a Nazi, but I'd like to see like someone rise up against like Nazi cyclopses or something.
Oh, everyone draws from World War One or two in the big epic works are kind of there. And I did, and none of them pop up on my immediate point there, but they're just the perfect villains. And if you ever want to make a sympathetic Nazi, don't.
I never would do that.
Oh yeah, Steven Spielberg said like that was how they kept getting away with the incredible amount of gore they had in the Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was like they only made us dial back once, and that was with a non-Nazi character.
It makes sense. It makes sense. Even to this day, I don't think anyone cares about Nazis dying in movies. Like, am I the only one that got like really sweaty and aggressive in the movie theater for Inglourious Bastards?
I think someone said that Quentin Tarantino was like, they really shouldn't be as vicious and bad as the Nazis, but it's being vicious and bad to Nazis. It's hard not to root for it.
Hey, CT.
I think the only Nazi
weird.
anyone has ever been sympathetic to was Elsa in Last Crusade. That's because she's hot.
Why did when you said Elsa, when you said Elsa, that I thought Frozen? I'm really starting to be upset with myself now.
I point out that you're not the first person to make that joke there. And it's like, let it go. Because they say that at the end of Last Crusade, yes.
I think I was in the car one time and I have like a metal version of Let It Go and it came on and my girlfriend heard it. I was like, hey, you have your songs that you listen to.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Ariana Grande or whatever her name is.
Oh, yeah. In fact, Andy would know that with Lucifer Star there, but there's actually a Frozen joke in my space opera story because one of the characters is a bioroid, which is just basically like replicant slave labor for that you can purchase, and you can get any kind of specialized model you want. And she was a Disney princess with an adult mode.
Oh, I remember that.
And I'm like, just like I wrote that in there, just very dancing around it there, because it's like, who the fuck would have that? And I'm like, and of course they go, well, if it existed in real life, someone would buy it.
Her name is Ida. I remember there being an Ida, and then I think something else that was almost identical to Ida.
Yeah, like, it's Illa, which is just one letter off Elsa.
There you go.
CT, real quick, I wanted to say, like, you are so knowledgeable about so many things, especially all things nerdy and dorky. I would love to have you back on the podcast where we can talk about more themes of Lord of the Rings, talk about The Last Jedi, just have like a podcast with no specific thing going on. We just sit down, chat, have fun with the chat actually, and just all of us just talk dork, you know?
It would be hilarious. I think we
That would be fun.
discussed 30 minutes about harping on the Solo's flaws.
Yeah, chat. Everyone in chat, would you guys like that? Let's hear it from the people if they would like to hear something like that. And also, guys, if you're in chat, why don't you go ahead and throw out some recommendations that you'd like to see in the show? I did,
One of our guests called it the Fantasy Tangents podcast. We both know who they're talking about.
wow.
Oh yes.
Wow. It's they're mad at me because I'm wearing a shirt today. That's
Oh, yes.
why.
Yes,
That's
the Last
why.
Jedi is like the Phantom Menace, in that you just remove the lightsaber fights and put them together, and you have the movie.
That is awesome. Well done, Regine. That is probably the best YouTube comment we've gotten. You win the award for best YouTube comment of the year thus far. Well done.
Rajin is sassy. He's
Oh,
so sassy.
I
think he loves
I can't see
me.
the comments. I'm gonna have to go over them when this goes up.
Wait,
Also-
Rajin is a guy, right? Because I was just calling him he.
I want to say yes, but he's in the comments or she's in the comments, so they will let us know.
Let us know. Let
Let
it
it
go.
Let it
All
go.
right.
Let the Grail go.
Also, one thing before we leave, this is not a tangent. First of all, go buy CT Phipps' book, especially just for the cover. I mean, it's just, I know that's the wrong thing to say, but I love the cover.
Yeah.
Also, I am over halfway through Heirs to Destiny. And guys, in my opinion, it's one of Andy's best works. It's like reading poetry. I mean, the guy's got a handle of his fantasy, of his craft. You can tell that he spent a lot of time on it. The world is like, you walk away from reading it and you kind of feel like the world is real, like you're reading about Wakanda or some country that's actually exists. That's how well thought out Andy's world is. And I was wondering, like, does he have like an Excel spreadsheet somewhere that has like all these details? Because
Word
it's like
document.
you have a Word document of it, because it's a ton of stuff. It's a ton. We have religion.
I do one for the world itself. So that includes, like, for this new one that I'm doing, it's military. It's got all of the duchies in the continent, the cities, the garrisons, the armies that are in each of the garrisons, the makeup of the military, and then I've got sort of like the character notes as well.
Dang, I use it's definitely inspired me to up it with the Bizarre Blade series. So I'm like adding all sorts of cool stuff. Not because I'm not forcing it in there, just because I want to, just to make it more fun. Add some lore, you know. Is there anything else, guys? We want to talk about? Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
That's what I was
Andy.
going to say. Is when you build the history into the world. You have the legends, you have the myths, you have the people talk about the changes. Like I just like name dropping, like someone in one of the books, there's they're talking about revolts, and they just say the 50-day revolt, and everybody in the world knows exactly what they're talking about. And so it gives you this sense that this world is lived in beyond just being introduced to it through the pages of a fantasy novel, and it makes it much more real.
I definitely try and throw in as much as I can into my world to fill in the background, and but you also have to write those down, because if you screw that up, you break your immersion, and that can really hurt a fantasy more than any other genre. Because you have to sell these worlds.
Awesome. Well, guys, is there anything else we want to talk about before we end this podcast?
No, why don't we, CT, why don't you tell our our viewers / listeners where they can find you?
Well, I am available on Twitter under the handle Willowhugger from my days of a Buffy Vampire Slayer fan before I became an author. I have a blog called the United Federation of Charles, where I do reviews, and I have a CT Phipps author page where I just announce what comes out and so on. And definitely, I recommend you guys check out either my my works on Audible, where I have some absolutely wonderful narrators, or Amazon. Under CT Phipps, not Charles Phipps Phippiditis.
Awesome. Andy, are we still here? Did I cut
I'm
out?
still here. So next week we have the absolutely awesome David Dalglish coming in. He is the author of the Half Orcs series, which almost all of us have read. He also wrote the Shadow Dance series, which is it introduces the character. I'm going to tell him this next week. I wanted to name my character the Watcher because that was kind of like a cool name, but he has the character the King's Watcher, and so I was like, crap, I can't do it. And I had read the Half Orc series and loved this character of the Watcher. He's pretty much exactly like the Hunter in that he's got a lot of mysterious backstory, stuff like that. And I loved it so much that it was a huge influence on the Hunter of Aramis. So next week we're going to have him on. I'm super excited to talk to him about his stuff.
Is he an indie author?
Nope, he is Big Five.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, it doesn't seem like it. Not, it's just the covers. You can tell that sort of fantasy style the Big Fives go for. You can kind of tell the difference. Like, I believe like we go more high def and indie.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
And it's awesome. Like his Half Orc series was amazing because you've got these two brothers with very similar backgrounds, and they take these widely diverging paths where one becomes a hero and one becomes the villain. And so it's these two brothers squaring off against each other. And it was something that was so fresh and original in the fantasy genre overall. This real Cain and Abel story, which is one of the oldest stories in the world, but bringing it into a fantasy world. I had never read anything like that before. And it totally hooked me. That was one of the series that I just blasted through in the space of a few weeks because it was awesome. So I was super excited to talk to him next week and get his thoughts on all kinds of fantasy stuff.
Do you speed read or something?
Yes.
Do you like what words do you skip?
The, a, and. No, I don't know. Just there's a lot of stuff you can get by skimming.
Okay.
You maybe miss out on a few details here and there, but nothing super important. Like you can learn to pick up all of the really important context based on the structure of the paragraph.
I got you. I was always wondering how that works because I'm a slow reader. Awesome. CT, anything else you want to add, man?
Oh, no. Thank you very much for having me.
CT, you're great. And I'm serious about that podcast where we just dork it out.
Yeah, anytime, man.
Well, thank you very much for showing up and being an awesome guest on the Fantasy Fiends podcast. Andy, anything else?
That is it.
All right, guys in chat, thank you all so much for being so active. It's hilarious watching you guys and what y'all say. Sometimes it's like distracting, but I just can't. I'm like addicted now to watching seriously that good. You guys are awesome. Please hit that like button if you haven't subscribed. I don't want to insult our fans, so just subscribe. Anyways, guys, thank you so much. I love you all. Thank you all for the kind words for Willie. He's in a better place. Also, guys, thank you so much for bearing with me. It's been a hard day to be positive, but I tried, and your kind words really helped me get through it. I love you all. CT, thank you so much. Andy, it was good seeing that beautiful mug of yours. And that's it for the Fantasy Fiends podcast. We'll see you next week. Love you all. Have a great night.